"What's going on?" I asked, my gaze darting between their smug faces. They surrounded me like a pack that had finally cornered its prey, each one wearing a look of satisfaction. My in-laws leaned in, relishing the moment as if they had rehearsed the scene for months. Finally, one of them spoke, their voice dripping with barely contained glee. "We need to have a serious talk." I took a steady breath, keeping my expression neutral. "All right, go on." Edgar, my husband, let out a deep sigh, his eyes refusing to meet mine. "I sold the house to my parents," he announced, pausing deliberately before delivering the final blow. "And I think we should get a divorce." A ripple of satisfaction passed through my in-laws as they exchanged knowing glances, their triumph unmistakable. Without missing a beat, I reached into my bag, pulled out the signed divorce papers, and placed them on the table. Then, I slipped off my wedding ring, setting it beside them with quiet finality. "Then I guess I'll be leaving." They had no idea what was coming next. My name is Madison, and I just turned 50. Years have passed since I married Edgar, and our children have long since grown up and moved on, building independent lives of their own. Once, I was an ordinary salaried worker, but thanks to a friend's encouragement, I transitioned into something new, teaching handmade accessory crafts. What began as a simple hobby has turned into a profession, one that brings me fulfillment in ways I never imagined. Some might scoff at the idea of turning a pastime into a livelihood, but I don't care. I'm happy. Edgar and I met at work. He was with a client company, and as our professional paths crossed, our relationship deepened. Love led us to marriage, and for a while, life was good. 3 years in, we welcomed our son, a bright, energetic boy who grew into a successful man. He graduated from a prestigious university, married well, and is thriving in his own world. I am proud of him. But no amount of success in our son's life could change the cracks forming in my marriage. Over time, Edgar changed. The kind, considerate man I married became someone else, demanding, dismissive, treating me as little more than a housemaid. His moods shifted unpredictably, his criticisms cut in deeper with each passing day. Recently, his temper had worsened, his words turning sharp and cruel over the smallest inconveniences. I had long wanted to leave, but one thing held me back: mortgage. The house we lived in was recently rebuilt, a project I had personally funded. Every penny saved, every detail carefully chosen. This house was my dream, not just bricks and walls, but a reflection of my aspirations. A spacious kitchen, a sunlit living room. He had envisioned it all, and I made it happen. Edgar contributed nothing financially, yet he had opinions, so many opinions. He sulked when his suggestions weren't prioritized, grumbled that it was a waste of money. "This is just throwing money away," he'd say, scowling. I ignored him. This was my vision, my hard work. Still, the cost had been greater than expected, forcing us to take on a larger loan than planned. It was daunting at our age, but I held on to the belief that the joy of a fresh start in a home built with love would be worth it. Edgar, however, only grew more resentful. His bitterness festered, poisoning our home. Then, one day, he quit his job without warning, without reason. He now spent his days idling, contributing nothing, while I managed the household alone. And then, the final insult sold my house. A few months after we moved in, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I rose to answer, but Edgar beat me to it, as if it had been expecting the visitor. Laughter and cheerful voices filled the entrance. Then, the living room door swung open, revealing two familiar figures, Bradley and Emerson, my in-laws. A knot tightened in my stomach. From the moment I married Edgar, they had never truly accepted me. They looked down on my background, sneered at my lower status, and made their disapproval clear even on my wedding day. Their interference in our marriage was relentless, each encounter leaving me exhausted. For a while, I thought they had finally backed off, but now, standing in my living room, their smirks told me otherwise. I greeted them politely, masking my unease. I had no idea that this visit would change everything. I felt a slight tension as they passed by, deliberately brushing against my shoulder without a word. Their cold indifference was intentional, their smug expressions making it clear they were enjoying this moment. As they moved through the house, admiration filled their voices. They marveled at the spacious kitchen, their envy thinly veiled beneath forced compliments. Edgar, beaming with pride, eagerly played host, guiding them through each carefully designed space, as though it were his own achievement. When they finally returned to the living room, their faces were alight with satisfaction, but Edgar's demeanor shifted, his posture stiffened, and his voice cut through the air with sharp authority. "Hurry up and prepare tea and snacks." Caught off guard, I moved quickly, fumbling as I arranged the tray. Yet, despite my efforts, their disapproval remained palpable. "Is this really the best you can offer?" Bradley muttered, barely disguising his disdain. As they finished their drinks, he leaned back and cast a slow, assessing gaze around the room. "It's quite lovely," he admitted, though his interest was clearly more in the house itself than anything I had prepared for them. Then, with an air of casual finality, Edgar turned to his parents, his smile widening. "Why don't you move in with us?" I blinked, stunned by the suggestion. He hadn't even glanced in my direction, as if my presence in this conversation was irrelevant. His parents exchanged pleased glances but said nothing. Instead, they stood, murmured vague goodbyes, and left, their retreating figures disappearing beyond the door. As I watched them go, a hollow feeling settled in my chest. Edgar, who had barely spoken to me in months, had just shared laughter and conversation with his joy effortless, something I hadn't seen from him in years. The distance between us had never felt so vast. Following Edgar's invitation, his parents' visits became more frequent. At first, they came a few times a month, then several times a week, until soon, their presence became a near-daily intrusion. Their criticisms were relentless, not particularly good enough. Edgar instead, he fueled their discontent, turning my inconveniences into exaggerated reasons. "You never listened. You ruined our son's life." That accusation never ended, and though I bit my tongue, forced out apologies, my patience was wearing thin. Before long, they stopped waiting for an invitation. Even when I wasn't home, they arrived unannounced. Their presence on the table was the smell of beer, empty bottles discarded carelessly, stains soaking into the new rug. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt tainted. I confronted Edgar, frustration spilling into my voice. "This is my house. I paid for it. I cleaned it, and yet you let them treat it like a tavern." He'd barely looked up. "You're overreacting." But it wasn't just the drinking. There was something else. I began finding betting slips proof of Edgar's growing obsession with gambling. He lost more than he won, the financial strain evident. One evening, I confronted him. "The money you're wasting on gambling is my hard-earned income." He only shrugged, indifferent to the damage he was causing. Then, his parents started timing their visits more strategically, showing up only when they knew I wouldn't be home. One day, I returned earlier than expected and found them lounging comfortably in my living room. I frowned. "See, what are you doing here?" They exchanged smug glances. "Just visiting," one of them said coolly. "Not like you're ever around." Their casual dismissal sent a surge of anger through me. They had stopped seeing me as the homeowner. To them, I was an inconvenienced temporary occupant in what they now considered their space. Something inside me shifted. I had tolerated too much for too long, but I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. I needed a plan. Then, something strange happened. One afternoon, when I was supposed to be out, they arrived unannounced. Their timing was unusual. I folded my arms, eyeing them skeptically. "Well, isn't this a surprise? You only seem to come when I'm not home." They ignored my remark, stepping inside as if they owned the place. Edgar greeted them warmly, leading them through the house with an eagerness I couldn't ignore. They inspected everything: the kitchen, the bathroom, even opening cabinets as if they were taking stock. Watching them, an unsettling realization crept over me. They weren't just visiting, they were evaluating. By the time they left, they wore the same smug expressions they'd had after their first visit. They had confirmed something I wasn't yet privy to. I turned to Edgar, my voice cold. What was that all about? He barely spared me a glance. "None of your business." But it was my business. A sinking feeling settled in my chest. I didn't know what Edgar was planning, but I could sense it. He was up to something. And then, the final blow came. One evening, I returned home from work to find a massive moving truck parked in front of our house. The logo read Moving Center. Panic flared inside me. I scanned the driveway, spotting Edgar deep in conversation with the moving crew. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away and disappeared into the house. A moment later, my in-laws arrived, stepping out of their car with casual ease. They greeted me as if nothing was amiss. Edgar welcomed them inside. The air was thick with tension as I followed, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then I saw it. Boxes, packed and stacked, furniture being shifted. This wasn't just a visit. Something was happening. And I had a terrible feeling. I was about to find out exactly what it was. I stepped inside, and my heart sank. The furniture I once knew of belongings I had carefully chosen had vanished. In their place stood my in-laws' outdated pieces, arranged as if they had lived here all along. I lowered myself onto the sofa, feeling their eyes on me. They surrounded me with smug satisfaction, their expressions reeking of triumph. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. Finally, one of them spoke, barely concealing their glee. "We need to talk." I met their gaze, feigning calmness. "What is it?" Edgar sighed, refusing to look at me. "I sold the house to my parents," he said, pausing for effect. Then, as if delivering the final blow, he added, "And I think we should get a divorce." His parents nodded, their smirks deepening. They were enjoying this. But I didn't react. I had seen this coming. Without hesitation, I picked up the divorce papers, signed them, and slipped my wedding ring onto the table. "I'll be leaving." Then, their smiles faltered. They had expected tears, protests, anything but my unwavering indifference. What they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment. Edgar and his parents' behavior had long raised suspicions, especially their frequent visits when I wasn't home. To confirm my instincts, I had discreetly installed surveillance cameras throughout the house, syncing them to my phone. At first, I simply monitored their conversations. Then, one day, I caught them on camera laughing, gloating, discussing their plan to sell the house behind my back. That was all I needed. Silently, I took action. Using the information I had gathered, I arranged for the home loan previously under my name alone to be transferred to Edgar. After all, if they wanted the house, they could deal with the mortgage too. $1,900 a month. Edgar didn't have a stable job. His parents had no real income. I knew they couldn't afford it. And I didn't care. Free from their manipulation, I moved into a new, beautifully furnished home. My own space, my own sanctuary. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Edgar and his parents standing on my doorstep, their faces tight with barely concealed panic. "What are you doing here?" I asked, blocking their entrance. They pushed past me, slamming a document onto the table. "You changed the name on the loan without our permission," Edgar accused. I met his glare, unimpressed. "Yes, I did. After all, you wanted me out, didn't you?" Their stunned silence was deeply satisfying. Then, the truth spilled out. They were unemployed. They couldn't afford the payments. Edgar, shifting uncomfortably, admitted, "We can't pay that amount." I shrugged. "Then the bank will start adding late fees, and if you don't pay, they'll seize the house. Not my problem anymore." His mother paled. "What are we supposed to do?" she muttered. I folded my arms. "Maybe get a job. It's time for a fresh start." Their faces drained of color. They had no savings, no backup plan. Edgar was already drowning in gambling debt, and now he was tied to a mortgage he couldn't afford. Their desperation finally showed. "We've been through so much together," Edgar pleaded, attempting a look of regret. I didn't fall for it. Without another word, I shut the door in their faces. In the weeks that followed, their situation worsened. Desperate, they even reported me to the police claiming I had tricked them, but there was no case. Eventually, crushed by financial strain, they were forced to move into a cheap apartment on the outskirts of town. Edgar found a part-time job, scraping together just enough to survive. Meanwhile, my life flourished. I poured my energy into work and, in my spare time, started a blog about handmade crafts. It took off unexpectedly, bringing in extra income. Before long, I was receiving requests for workshops and classes, doubling my monthly earnings. Remarrying, not a thought in my mind. I was content navigating life on my own terms. One day, while organizing, I stumbled upon an old household account book from the early days of my marriage. As I flipped through its pages, memories of sacrifices and financial struggles resurfaced. I took a deep breath, then closed the book. That chapter was over. Now, I was writing a new one in my own,